and using those kind of words. We'll get out of that soon. But what is mythology? So first of all, you need to know that as soon as you add an O-L-O-G-Y to any noun, you have the study of something. So if it's mythology, it's the study of myths. And back in the 1700s, 1800s, there was a big movement that brought everybody, not everybody, a lot of the smart dudes, brought them to a place where they started to challenge myths that had been passed down for centuries, that came from all these many odd and multiple type gods that had been created. By the way, that goes all the way back to my great grandfather by the name of Abraham. He was brought up with his father and his mother, and his father had a idol shop, and they made idols, and they worshipped idols. In that day, before God introduced himself to Abraham. And Abraham then accepted God and put aside those myths. But all through the generations following, there had been many myths, all kinds of myths out there. And so the Enlightenment period stoked the minds of a lot of people into saying, let's deal with this and let's get rid of the myths. And in so doing, they came up and said, we have something we could easily follow, and that is what they call the laws of nature. Meaning, I'm sorry, I have to keep canceling out of this thing they're trying to get me to join here in this building. Meantime, there were a lot of problems that were surfacing at that point in time that they wanted to deal with. So they accepted that there are laws of nature, and there are a whole bunch of different laws of nature. For instance, if you were to go and lie on a body of water, most of us in this room, maybe not me and a couple others, but if you were to lie in a body of water, flat on your back, you would normally do what? No, come on. You would normally float. Why would you normally float? It's what?
You're lighter than the water.
You're lighter than the water that you're displacing. All right? So now, if you had a lot of weight on you, you needed to stretch your body out further so that you spread out that weight so that it displaces the right amount of water that will keep you buoyant, and you'll float. For some of us, we have a problem. We can't do that because we have too much weight, and we can't stretch ourselves that much, and we're going to sink because we're not displacing the water properly, and it's not buoyant enough to hold us up. What happens for those of you who can float in water, if you try to stand on the water instead of laying flat, where the surface of your body spreads out further, and now you're going to stand vertical, what do you think is going to happen to you when you stand like that in water?
You sink.
You're going to sink really fast. The reason is you're not displacing the water in such a fashion that it would hold up the weight that's building up vertically. It's going to cause you to sink. So there's a law of nature that is going to happen every single time somebody does that. And there are many other laws that are out there of nature that exhibit the same truth concept. That laws of nature are here to stay. They're going to happen 24/7, and it's going to be 365 and a half days a year, and it's going to be for centuries and decades of centuries, millennia. It's not going to alter. So they said back in the 1700s that let's hook onto that concept and let's say that's reality, because we can test it, we can see it happening, we can watch it, observe it, and we know it's going to happen repetitively, and that becomes a law.
No exceptions.
Thank you. No exceptions.
How about if you try to float on the Sea of Galilee?
Well, no, try to say, what if you try to float on the Dead Sea?
Well, that's what I mean.
Well, that's a big difference between the Sea of Galilee, a couple hundred miles apart.
Well, no, you understood what I said.
Yes, I did. The Dead Sea happens to be full of salt. Not full of salt, but 1/3 of the Dead Sea is salt and other minerals. And anybody in here could actually sit down and read a newspaper and you're not going to sink. And thank you. That's going to help me illustrate something when we get to it. I appreciate that. All right, so you get the idea. There are a lot of laws of nature that have come to the forefront from men and women, but mainly men, who, like Isaac Newton and or David Hume and others of that nature, that have indeed come to the forefront, and they spelled out what those laws of nature were, and they gave a definition way back in the 1700s, especially through David Hume, that tells us what they believe concerning natural laws and science. Because they see the natural laws and miracles, natural laws via science in inspecting miracles and try to understand how can miracles happen, which oftentimes shows what they believed and still do at this point, those who put their minds together and came up with this whole concept of natural laws. And by the way, I'm 100% for natural laws. They're there and they work and you can count on them. But they came up with the whole concept that anything that happens that should be following the course of the natural laws, but anything that happens such as standing on water, which is against that concept, is an exception. And that means it can happen. In other words, that's exactly what they said. Let me tell you what David Hume had said. His definition, and it still holds today, is, quote, "We have uniform experience against miracles, and that miracles are exceptions to natural laws, which have no exceptions." That's double talk, by the way. It's what we call circular reasoning, because if you are saying, I'm looking to see if there are miracles that are happening that are exceptions to that natural law that it's involved with, if you say it can't happen because there are no exceptions, then in advance you have already said there is no such thing as a miracle. Even though you haven't tested everything that's out there and haven't seen every thing that has been referred to as a miracle. Something that happens in exception to the law of nature. So that if I was to pick up my laptop right now, and I was to just hold it here and let it go, it would fall to the ground. But let me remind you that if I held it in my hand instead of letting it go, then I have caused an exception to that natural law. Because by all rights, it should fall. And it's not going to fall because I have done something that will affect that natural law so that it doesn't work that way in that one instance. Yes?
That's not true at all. You merely exerted an equal force through the muscles in your arms to balance and equal
I
the force
agree.
of gravity. So there are two natural forces. Your muscles exert a natural force. There's nothing unnatural
Okay,
about that.
I'm going to say, first of all, I don't say it's unnatural, number one. Number two, I'm going to ask for those kind of inputs, wait until I'm finished, and then we'll deal with them. No, I normally would do this, but we don't have 2 or 3 hours that I can give you the presentation that I'm talking about. The one thing that I am saying to you is that there are ways to affect that natural law so that not all of the natural laws that we're going to involve ourselves with are going to work 100% of the time if you, through whatever means, cause it not to do that. If you can cause it not to do that by using some other force, then you have stopped that from actually happening that way. Now, that doesn't mean that isn't still a law of nature and that it functions as a law of nature. What it simply is saying is that there are ways to affect different outcomes as it relates to that law of nature, albeit on a temporary basis. So what's happening here is, and I'm just sharing with you, first of all, the differences between what science says, that there can't be any exceptions at all to the laws of nature. If they say that, then they are saying that there cannot ever be a quote-unquote miracle, something that happens in spite of the fact that you have the law of nature. And so if that's the case, and if it would be absolutely true and provable with evidence, then I would have to agree to that. But there are, obviously, from what I'm going to be sharing with you, some differences between what we understand outside of the natures of law that can happen and sometimes do. So that's the difference between, and I said to you, this is the standoff that exists between the two. The same thing happens with the water scenario. We know from the Bible anyway that Jesus walked on water in the Sea of Galilee. He walked on water. Didn't sink. That goes against, obviously, the law of nature as it relates to how water works and is displaced and how it holds up, what's standing or lying on top of the water. The law of nature says that's not a possibility. The law of nature says that. But the law of nature, or the scientists, or those who believe these facts, have not examined every so-called miracle that has ever happened. And so they cannot tell you, beyond a shadow of a doubt, there isn't any such thing as something out there that could affect that law of nature and allow it to happen. And you cannot say that without first exhibiting or making sure that you have sufficient evidence that there is no so-called miracle that has happened or can happen that would alter that. The best you can do is say if it's happened in the past and it happens all the time, then there's every reason for us to believe that it will continue to go that direction. Everybody understands the difference here. There is a difference. You may not agree with that. I know, obviously, there are some that disagree. But what I'm saying to you is that a hard, fixed concept of a law of nature doesn't say, except for when you have another force that is another law of nature affecting it. Doesn't matter what's affecting it. All I'm saying to you is that we need to understand that one law of nature can be affected no matter and altered and changed on a temporary basis, buy anything out there that is capable of doing that.